What if the person meant to protect you became your jailer? For 20 years, Tristan lived this nightmare, trapped inside a suburban home that looked ordinary from the outside but concealed horrors within its walls. His stepmother, Miranda, who promised his biological mother she would care for him, instead transformed his childhood bedroom into a prison cell. Every morning, Tristan woke to the same four walls, the same barred window that allowed just enough sunlight to remind him of the world he couldn't reach. His meals, if you could call them that, were barely enough to keep him alive. His body withered, while his mind fought against the psychological chains Miranda had meticulously crafted. "No one is looking for you," she would tell him in her measured, calm voice. "No one remembers you exist." Day after day, year after year, these words became the foundation of his reality. The neighbors on Maple Street in quiet Briarwood never suspected. The occasional community event would see Miranda arrive alone, always ready with a rehearsed explanation for her stepson's absence. He's away at boarding school, or he's visiting relatives. Her calculated charm disarmed any potential questions. Then came that frigid January evening when something inside Tristan, some final, unbroken piece of his humanity, refused to surrender. With trembling hands, he retrieved a small lighter he had hidden years ago, a forgotten tool that would become his salvation. The stack of newspapers ignited quickly, flames dancing across the pages, consuming the darkness that had defined his existence. Smoke filled his lungs as he pounded desperately on the reinforced door. The noise caught the attention of a passerby, a neighbor whose curiosity about odd sound from the Rourke house had been growing for weeks. When emergency responders broke through the front door, they discovered not just a house fire but a crime scene spanning 2 decades. Their flashlights revealed a gaunt figure, a 28-year-old man with the muscle development of a teenager and eyes that had forgotten how to hope. The story of Tristan's captivity and miraculous escape shocked the nation. How could such profound abuse happen in plain sight? What psychological tactics could keep someone imprisoned for so long? And most disturbing, how many others might be suffering in similar silence right now, just waiting for someone to notice? If you're fascinated by stories of survival against unimaginable odds, hit subscribe now. This channel uncovers the darkest corners of human behavior, not just to shock you, but to equip you with awareness that could save lives. Before the nightmare began, Tristan's childhood held the warmth of an ordinary family. Born to David and Clarissa Winters, he spent his first years in a modest home filled with laughter. David, a construction worker with a passion for woodworking, would craft small toys for his son during evenings. Clarissa, who taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school, filled their home with books and encouraged Tristan's natural curiosity. He had his father's eyes and my determination, Clarissa would later tell investigators. Family photos showed a bright-eyed boy with an infectious smile, a stark contrast to the hollow-cheeked man who would eventually emerge from captivity. This semblance of normal family life collapsed when David died in a workplace accident. Tristan was only 5 years old. The insurance money barely covered the funeral expenses, leaving Clarissa to face mounting bills and the crushing weight of single parenthood. "I try to hold everything together," Clarissa explained during court testimony. "But I was drowning in grief while trying to keep a brave face for my son." She picked up extra teaching shifts and weekend work at a local cafe, leaving precious little time for parenting. The introduction of Miranda seemed like the answer to her prayers. They met at a community support group for people dealing with loss. Miranda presented herself as a widow who had found her calling, helping children through trauma. Her credentials appeared impeccable, a background in child psychology and volunteer work at youth centers. She knew exactly what to say, Clarissa recalled. She offered solutions to problems I hadn't even voiced yet. When Miranda suggested that Tristan spend weekends at her home to give Clarissa time to work and recover, the arrangement seemed ideal. Miranda's home was spacious, in a good school district, and she demonstrated what appeared to be genuine affection for Tristan. The transition happened gradually. First, weekend stays extended to 3 days, then 4. Miranda pointed out how exhausted Clarissa looked, offering to take more responsibility. "Let me help you," became her refrain, delivered with concerning eyes and a comforting touch on Clarissa's arm. When Miranda suggested becoming Tristan's legal guardian. "Just temporarily, until you're back on your feet," Clarissa hesitated but ultimately agreed. The court approved the arrangement, seeing a stable home environment with a woman whose references and background check raised no concerns. Within months, Miranda relocated to Briarwood, 2 hours away. For a better school district, she assured Clarissa. The distance made visits difficult for a working mother without reliable transportation. Phone calls grew shorter, then less frequent. When Clarissa finally managed to visit after 3 months, Tristan seemed withdrawn, his once exuberant personality muted. "He's adjusting," Miranda explained. "The therapist says too many disruptions could set back his progress." She presented progress reports from a school and therapist that didn't exist. By the time Clarissa realized something was wrong, Miranda had already filed for permanent guardianship, citing abandonment. With her meager resources, Clarissa couldn't fight the legal battle against Miranda's fabricated evidence and character witnesses. How often do we miss the warning signs when someone isn't who they appear to be? The calculated patience of a predator often disguises itself as kindness. Miranda didn't rush. She moved with deliberate precision, isolating her victim one careful step at a time, severing connections so methodically that no one noticed the pattern until it was complete. Miranda's 2-story colonial on Elm Street presented a flawless facade, neatly trimmed hedges, fresh paint, and seasonal wreaths that changed with the holidays. Neighbors commented on her immaculate lawn and the occasional glimpses of her shy stepson during his first year in Briarwood. What none could see was how methodically she was converting an ordinary home into an elaborate containment facility. The transformation began with Tristan's bedroom on the 2nd floor. What was once a standard boys' room, with blue walls and model airplanes hanging from the ceiling, gradually changed. First came the removal of dangerous objects, scissors, pencil sharpeners, anything Miranda deemed potentially harmful. Then the window modifications, initially explained to Tristan as extra security for the neighborhood, reinforced with steel bars disguised as decorative elements. "I'm only thinking of your safety," she would say, her voice gentle even as she installed the first deadbolt on his bedroom door, a lock that only worked from the outside. The most extensive renovations happened while Tristan attended school. He would return to find more of his possessions missing, replaced by sparse, institutional furnishings. His closet door was removed to eliminate hiding places. His bed was bolted to the floor to prevent accidents. Each change came with a rational explanation that became increasingly difficult to question. By the time Miranda pulled Tristan from public school, claiming to homeschool him, the conversion was nearly complete. The final phase involved soundproofing, disguised as acoustic panels for his music practice. Neighbors never heard his screams during punishment sessions. Miranda's psychological warfare proved even more devastating than the physical confinement. She implemented a points system where basic necessities became privileges to be earned. A bathroom break, 5 points. Speaking without permission, -10 points. A single meal, 20 points. The arbitrary nature of point allocation meant Tristan never knew if he would eat on any given day. "The world is dangerous for someone like you," became her constant refrain. She fabricated news stories about kidnapped children who escaped their homes only to suffer fates worse than death. When Tristan received rare glimpses of actual television, she would point out crimes as evidence of the dangers waiting for disobedient children. The physical conditions deteriorated as Miranda's control solidified. The room, approximately 9 by 12 feet, contained only a mattress on a metal frame, a plastic bucket for waste, and a small desk where he completed lessons that consisted primarily of copying passages about obedience and gratitude. A single bare bulb illuminated the space, controlled by a switch outside the room. Miranda would often leave him in darkness for days as punishment. His meals, when earned, consisted primarily of plain oatmeal, occasional canned vegetables, and water. Medical records later revealed severe malnutrition, vitamin D deficiency, and muscle atrophy consistent with extended immobility. The contrast between Miranda's public persona and private cruelty grew starker over time. While Tristan existed in squalor upstairs, the downstairs remained showcase-ready. She hosted book club meetings in a pristine living room just below Tristan's prison. Garden club members admired her immaculate kitchen while unaware of the captive who hadn't seen fresh fruit in years. She volunteered for every community event, one neighbor later recalled. Christmas cookie exchanges, fundraisers for the elementary school, always the first to help. This carefully constructed public image deflected any potential suspicion. The occasional questions about her stepson were met with elaborate stories about boarding school, health issues requiring specialized care, or extended visits with his biological mother. The progression from guardian to captor wasn't a sudden transformation, but a carefully executed strategy spanning years. By the time Tristan reached adolescence, the psychological conditioning was so complete that the heavy locks and barred windows had become almost redundant. His mind had become the most effective prison of all. How many homes in a neighborhood present perfect exteriors while hiding secrets behind closed doors? How many smiling faces at community gatherings mask ruthless intentions? Tristan's existence within those four walls followed a rigid pattern designed to eliminate any sense of autonomy. Each day began with Miranda's voice through the door. Recite the rules. He would mechanically list them, speak only when spoken to, express gratitude for any food provided, complete all assigned tasks, never attempt contact with the outside world. Only after this ritual might the door unlock, allowing him a brief, supervised bathroom visit. Time blurred without markers to distinguish days. No birthdays, no holidays, no weekends. The barred window offered his only connection to the natural world, a small patch of sky that became his calendar. He tracked seasons through cloud patterns, leaf colors on a distant tree, and the changing angle of sunlight across his floor. I created an entire universe inside my head, Tristan later explained to his therapist. I invented friends who would visit when Miranda left the house. I built detailed cities and imagined walking their streets. This rich internal world became his sanctuary, the one place Miranda couldn't control. His physical space permitted just 4 steps in any direction. Exercise consisted of push-ups and sit-ups performed silently to avoid punishment. He developed precise routines, counting ceiling cracks, 347, measuring his room in finger widths, 214 by 172, and creating complex mathematical problems to solve mentally. These self-assigned tasks preserve cognitive function despite prolonged isolation. During her teaching sessions, Miranda required Tristan to write repetitive passages. I am nothing without Miranda's protection, or the outside world would destroy someone like me. Pages and pages filled with this psychological conditioning, which he was forced to read aloud each night before darkness fell. The psychological impact of such extended confinement manifested in numerous ways. Tristan developed compulsive behaviors, arranging his meager possessions in precise patterns, touching the north wall exactly 12 times before sleep, reciting memorized texts backward to prove his mind remained sharp. Hypervigilance became his constant state, his body tensed at the slightest sound of approaching footsteps. Perhaps most disturbing was the paradoxical attachment that formed despite, or because of, his captivity. Psychologists would later identify classic Stockholm Syndrome in Tristan's behavior and thought patterns. His dependency on Miranda became total. She controlled his food, light, human contact, and bathroom access. Any small kindness, an extra blanket during winter, a few additional minutes of light, a rare second portion of food, registered as profound benevolence. She saved the newspapers about child abductions, Tristan recalled. She would read them to me as proof that she was protecting me from worse fates. Over time, he began to believe her narrative, that the outside world was indeed dangerous, that her harsh methods were necessary for his survival. His coping mechanisms evolved with the passing years. Initial resistance gave way to compliance, then to anticipatory obedience, predicting Miranda's demands before she voiced them. He learned to detect subtle shifts in her mood from the sound of her footsteps or the way she unlocked the door. On rare occasions when Miranda entertained guests downstairs, Tristan pressed his ear to the floor, absorbing conversations about ordinary life, grocery prices, weather forecasts, neighborhood gossip. These stolen moments became treasures he would mentally replay for weeks afterward. His inner struggle remained his most private possession. "Part of me always knew this wasn't normal," he later told investigators. But that voice grew fainter every year. He described the conflict as two versions of himself. The original Tristan who remembered freedom and fought to preserve that memory, and the created Tristan who accepted captivity as protection. Most heartbreaking were the hidden acts of rebellion that sustained his sense of self. He collected small objects Miranda overlooked: a paperclip, a forgotten pen cap, a thread pulled from his mattress, and hid them in a small cavity he'd created in his wall. This secret collection became physical proof that he could still exercise choice, however limited. This story gets even more shocking. Like this video now if you want us to cover more cases of survival against impossible odds, where human resilience triumphs over calculated cruelty. The residents of Briarwood prided themselves on their tight-knit community. Block parties, neighborhood watch programs, and annual holiday celebrations fostered a sense of connection. Yet for 20 years, none penetrated Miranda's carefully constructed public persona. Miranda was involved in everything, recalled Patricia Dawson, who lived 3 houses down. "She coordinated meal deliveries when my husband was ill. She organized the neighborhood cleanup each spring." This active community engagement created an image of compassion that deflected questions about her private life. When asked about her stepson, Miranda had prepared a portfolio of responses that evolved as years passed. "He's at a specialized boarding school for gifted children," she would explain during Tristan's adolescent years. Later, the story shifted. He's studying abroad, or he's working with humanitarian groups overseas. She carried doctored photographs in her wallet, professionally altered images showing an aging Tristan in various international locations. The rare occasions when suspicions arose were masterfully handled. When a substitute mail carrier questioned why no mail ever arrived for her stepson, Miranda explained that he maintained a separate P.O. box to build independence. When renovation contractors needed access to the second floor, she scheduled the work during school hours when neighbors were away, personally supervising to ensure no one approached the modified room. The missed opportunities for intervention accumulated over the years. A plumber called to fix a leak noticed the unusual door modifications but dismissed them after Miranda explained her security concerns as a woman living alone. A visiting relative commented on the locked upstairs room, but accepted the explanation that it contained valuable antiques too fragile for guests. Perhaps the most significant missed opportunity came from Tristan's elementary school. Before Miranda withdrew him for homeschooling, his teacher noticed concerning behavior changes and unexplained absences. She initiated a meeting with the principal, but Miranda arrived with documentation from a fictitious psychologist diagnosing Tristan with anxiety disorders requiring specialized home care. The school, overwhelmed with other cases and satisfied with Miranda's seemingly professional approach, failed to follow up. The homeschooling provided perfect cover. In Briarwood County, requirements for homeschooling verification were minimal. Miranda submitted falsified assessment reports and maintained meticulous fake records of educational progress that satisfied the cursory annual reviews. "We all assumed she lived alone," one neighbor admitted after Tristan's discovery. "After a while, we forgot she ever mentioned having a stepson. How well do you really know your neighbors? What secrets might be hidden behind their doors?" The uncomfortable truth is that communities often see what they expect to see: a well-maintained home, a friendly wave, participation in local events. These superficial interactions rarely reveal what happens when the front door closes. After nearly 2 decades in captivity, something changed in Tristan's mind during the winter of his 20th year. The shift wasn't sudden, but rather the culmination of small rebellions that had been building beneath his compliant exterior. A series of events catalyzed this transformation, beginning with a fever that Miranda largely ignored, leaving him to suffer without medication for days. I realized then that I would die in that room, Tristan later explained. Not quickly, but slowly, forgotten by everyone. This recognition, that his captor would watch him deteriorate without intervention, shattered the protective illusion he had maintained about their relationship. During his feverish state, memories from his early childhood surfaced with unexpected clarity. He recalled his father's woodshop, his mother's voice reading bedtime stories, the feeling of grass beneath bare feet. These fragments of freedom awakened something primal within him, a will to survive that transcended the psychological conditioning of his captivity. For 3 months, Tristan meticulously observed Miranda's routines, noting that she had grown increasingly careless with security as years passed, and his submission seemed complete. The deadbolt sometimes remained unlocked when she believed him asleep. The duration of her absences became more predictable. Thursday evenings meant book club meetings lasting precisely 2 hours. Most crucially, he discovered a forgotten lighter tucked behind a loose baseboard, dropped there years earlier by a maintenance worker Miranda had hired to fix the heating system. Tristan concealed this precious tool inside his mattress, waiting for the perfect opportunity. That opportunity arrived on January 17th, a Thursday evening when Miranda departed for her book club meeting. The winter night had brought early darkness and plummeting temperatures. Tristan retrieved the lighter from its hiding place with trembling hands. He had never attempted to use such a device before. It took several attempts before the flame caught, his emaciated fingers struggling with the unfamiliar mechanism. His plan wasn't elaborate. Simple, desperate, and dangerous. He gathered the papers Miranda had forced him to write over years, the endless pages of self-degradation and forced gratitude. These documents, physical evidence of his psychological torture, would become his salvation. He arranged them in a small pile near the door, careful to position the fire where it would create maximum smoke but minimal risk of spreading beyond control. The papers ignited quickly, producing thick clouds of acrid smoke that rose toward the ceiling. Tristan dropped to the floor where the air remained clearer and began pounding on the door with systematic determination, calling for help with a voice hoarse from disuse. 3 houses down, Ellen Rodriguez was walking her dog when she noticed smoke seeping from an upstairs window of Miranda's home. "I knew something was wrong," she later testified. "The smoke had an unusual color, and I'd never seen that window open before." Ellen immediately called emergency services. The fire department arrived within 7 minutes, standard response time for Briarwood. What wasn't standard was the discovery they made upon entry. Following the smoke to its source, firefighters broke through the reinforced door to find a severely malnourished adult male gasping for breath on the floor of what was clearly a long-term imprisonment chamber. "At first, I thought we were looking at a teenager," Fire Captain James Morales recounted. "His physical development had been so stunted that none of us realized we were rescuing a man in his late 20s. The rescue itself unfolded with urgent efficiency. Paramedics administered oxygen while firefighters contained the small blaze. Tristan, barely conscious but clutching a handful of partially burned papers, was carried from the house on a stretcher as neighbors gathered on the street in bewildered concern. What happened next would fundamentally alter everyone involved in the case. When police officers entered the room after the fire was extinguished, they discovered not just a prison cell within an ordinary home, but an elaborate documentation system. Miranda had kept meticulous records of her abuse, journals detailing punishments, psychological experiments, and methods of control, hidden in a locked cabinet within her bedroom. Tristan arrived at Briarwood Memorial Hospital in critical condition. The medical assessment revealed the devastating physical toll of his captivity. At 28 years old, he weighed just 92 pounds, his body displaying severe muscle atrophy and bone density comparable to someone decades older. Blood tests indicated profound vitamin deficiencies, particularly D and B12, consistent with minimal sun exposure and nutritional neglect. His physical condition tells a story of systematic deprivation, explained Dr. Eleanor Patel, the attending physician. We found evidence of healed fractures that never received proper medical attention, dental issues from years without care, and vision damage from prolonged darkness. Most concerning were the neurological and psychological evaluations. MRI scans showed altered brain development, physical evidence of how isolation impacts neural pathways. Tristan exhibited symptoms of extreme post-traumatic stress, displayed abnormal responses to normal stimuli, and struggled with basic social interactions. Meanwhile, police transformed the Rourke residence into an exhaustive crime scene. Forensic teams documented every aspect of Tristan's prison room, measuring the barred windows, photographing the reinforced door, collecting samples from the waste bucket he'd been forced to use. The discovery of Miranda's journals provided investigators with a methodical account of the abuse, written in her own hand. In my 20 years of law enforcement, I've never seen such detailed records of deliberate cruelty, Detective Laura Hernandez stated during a press briefing. The journals revealed Miranda's calculated approach to breaking Tristan's will, documenting which deprivations produced the most compliance, which threats generated the most fear. Miranda returned home from her book club to find her street blocked with emergency vehicles. Her arrest occurred without incident, her expression impassive as officers read her rights. Only when informed that Tristan had survived did her composure briefly falter. The courtroom proceedings captivated national attention. Miranda maintained an icy demeanor throughout, pleading not guilty despite overwhelming evidence. Her defense attempted to portray her as mentally ill, suggesting she suffered from Munchausen syndrome by proxy, deriving satisfaction from controlling someone in her care. This strategy collapsed when prosecutors presented her journals, which demonstrated clear awareness of her actions. These are not the writings of someone disconnected from reality, the prosecutor emphasized. These are calculated methods of control, documented with purpose. Tristan's testimony, delivered via video to spare him the trauma of facing his captor, provided the most damning evidence. His measured recounting of daily life in captivity, delivered in a voice barely above a whisper, left many jurors visibly shaken. The guilty verdict came after just 4 hours of deliberation. The judge, noting the calculated and sustained nature of the abuse, delivered the maximum sentence: life imprisonment without possibility of parole. The Briarwood community experienced collective trauma in the aftermath. Neighbors who had admired Miranda struggled with guilt over missed warning signs. "We were all fooled," admitted the head of the neighborhood association. "It makes you question everything you think you know about the people around you." The case prompted immediate changes in local policies. The county strengthened homeschooling oversight, implementing mandatory in-person wellness checks. Child Protective Services received increased funding for investigative personnel. Community watch programs expanded their training to identify warning signs of isolation and abuse. For many residents, the most difficult realization was how effectively Miranda had manipulated public perception while committing unspeakable acts. "She brought cookies to my daughter's school fundraiser," one neighbor recalled, "while Tristan was locked upstairs, starving." Comment below with what you think Miranda's sentence should have been. Was life imprisonment sufficient for 20 years of calculated torture, or should the justice system have considered other options? Your perspective matters in these difficult conversations about punishment, rehabilitation, and justice. Tristan's journey back to the world began in a specialized rehabilitation center designed for trauma survivors. The initial months focused purely on physical recovery, rebuilding muscle strength, addressing nutritional deficiencies, and treating medical conditions resulting from prolonged confinement. Simple tasks represented major victories: walking unassisted for 5 minutes, making eye contact with healthcare providers, or choosing between meal options. Recovery isn't linear, explained Dr. May Wong, the psychologist who worked with Tristan during his first year of freedom. There were days of progress, followed by significant setbacks. Nightmares, panic attacks, and dissociative episodes remained common even as his physical health improved. The psychological aftermath of long-term captivity manifested in unexpected ways. Tristan initially requested that his hospital room door remain open at all times. He collected extra food packages after meals, hiding them throughout his room, a habit formed during years of unpredictable feeding schedules. Most telling was his difficulty making decisions after decades where choice was non-existent. The outside world overwhelmed him, Dr. Wong noted. Too many colors, sounds, options, and stimuli. We had to reintroduce freedom gradually, like teaching someone a new language. Reconnecting with his mother, Clarissa, proved both healing and challenging. Their reunion, carefully managed by trauma specialists, began with short, structured visits. 20 years of separation had transformed them both. Clarissa now in her late 50s with gray hair and weathered hands. Tristan, a man whose development had been frozen in adolescence. "I remember your voice," were his first words to her, a moment that became central to their shared healing. Beyond his personal recovery, Tristan's case catalyzed sweeping changes throughout Briarwood and beyond. His story became a cornerstone for training programs across multiple disciplines. Local police departments implemented new protocols for welfare checks, particularly for homeschooled children who might not have regular contact with mandated reporters. Social services underwent comprehensive restructuring, with additional funding allocated for investigative staff and reduced caseloads. The county created a specialized unit focused exclusively on educational neglect and isolation, directly addressing the gaps that had allowed Miranda's abuse to continue undetected. Perhaps most significantly, Tristan's case prompted community-level vigilance programs. Neighborhoods developed discrete reporting systems for concerning patterns, while maintaining respect for privacy. Schools enhanced training for identifying trauma responses in children, focusing on behavioral changes that might indicate home distress. 2 years after his rescue, Tristan made his first public appearance at a conference for child protection professionals. Though still hesitant in speech and movement, he delivered a powerful message. Look closer at perfect facades. Ask questions when explanations seem too convenient. Your attention might save someone waiting to be found. His ongoing recovery, with its struggles, breakthroughs, and setbacks, transformed from a private journey to a beacon for others. Each milestone in his healing reminded professionals and community members alike that even after decades of darkness, restoration remains possible. Tristan's story teaches us that freedom requires collective responsibility. His 20 years of captivity happened not just because of one person's cruelty, but because a community failed to see what was happening within its borders. True safety depends on neighbors who pay attention, systems that follow through, and individuals willing to ask uncomfortable questions. The warning signs of isolation and abuse often hide in plain view. Watch for patterns. A child suddenly withdrawn from school, a person mentioned but never seen, excessive security measures on residential homes, or explanations that shift over time. Notice when someone exhibits complete control over another person's communications and movements. These indicators alone don't prove abuse, but they merit closer attention and appropriate reporting. Educational institutions, healthcare providers, and community organizations across the country now incorporate lessons from Tristan's case into their training. His experience has transformed into a powerful teaching tool, helping professionals identify hidden victims and intervene before decades pass. 5 years after his rescue, Tristan established a foundation focused on supporting survivors of long-term captivity. The organization provides specialized rehabilitation services while educating communities about detecting hidden abuse. Recovery doesn't end with rescue, Tristan explains in the foundation's materials. It requires sustained support and understanding. His resilience demonstrates our remarkable capacity to rebuild after trauma. Though his captivity stole 20 years, his freedom has created ripples of awareness that will protect countless others in the future. This story reminds us that evil can hide in plain sight. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell so you never miss another true crime story that could save a life. By learning these lessons, you become part of a vigilant community that refuses to look away when something doesn't seem right.